Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 640th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a special pre-recorded conversation featuring Richard Jackson and Jeffrey Grunthaner on the occasion of Richard Jackson Works at Hauser and Wirth Zurich on view until December 23rd. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for actual necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the stolen land that we speak from. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest and host. A preeminent figure in American contemporary art since the 1970s, Richard Jackson is influenced by both abstract expressionism and action painting, exploring a performative painting process which seeks to extend the potential of painting by upending its technical conventions. Born in Sacramento in 1939, Jackson first came to international attention with a major presentation of his installation works at the Menil Collection in Houston in 1988. Followed by a 1992 exhibition, Helter Skelter at LACMA. And the host today, artist and writer Jeffrey Grunthaner, is currently based in Berlin. Their essays, articles, poems, and reviews have appeared via BOMB, ArtNet News, Hyperallergic, Drag City Books, American Art Catalogs, and other venues. Their poetry pamphlet, Aphid Poems, will be published in October by the Creative Writing Department. Some recent curatorial projects include the reading and discussion series Conversations on Contemporary Poetics at Hauser and Wirth, New York, Sun Oil for Open White Gallery in Berlin, and Feelings for Synthesis Gallery in Berlin. And with that, it's my pleasure to pass it over to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chloe. And again, thank you, Richard, for agreeing to do this and to have this interview. So I guess to start off, I'd kind of maybe want to talk about recent history, and then maybe can talk more about biographical details, like kind of what brought you to art and stuff. So last night was sort of the activation of this show. And you let it off with kind of you realized the painting on site. Is that what you would say, or how would you describe?
Like most of my work, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. So there's a device, a shooting gallery, kind of an old style shooting gallery where things go around, and instead of shooting at them with a real gun, a 22 or whatever, I shot at it with a paintball gun. So it somehow that transfers into my idea of making painting more than just a painting, and making it more of an activity or evidence of an activity. And I shot at it for an hour or so, and now it's finished. So it doesn't look like it originally did, but now it's like, in my mind, maybe a painting or a piece of art, I don't know.
Sure. Now this, the shooting gallery piece, as we can see in the image, it has symbolism in it, right? I believe this is the nurses or medical.
That's a Swiss flag.
That's the Swiss flag. Okay.
Yeah, and then it's the Swiss flag and the American flag. And what the Swiss and the Americans have in common is they love to shoot.
Yeah.
They love they love their guns. They have things here where people go out and shoot. I've been to those places. They're called shoots and houses. And the one that I went to was a house that had a restaurant bar inside. And all these guys get together on whenever they have time, weekends probably. And the whole side of the house actuates down. And then I forget how many yards they shoot. I think they shoot a long ways with open sights.
Okay.
And they all get together. They shoot so far away that they have a monitor that they can see where they're, they have a video camera on the target, and they can see where they're shooting. And that's the way Swiss people, they all have guns because they're in the military. They have military service and they're given a gun. And then you contrast that with the craziness that goes on in America with guns.
Yeah.
You know.
Is that maybe sort of coming out of the American craziness with guns, like why there's like a rotating clown head?
Yeah, I guess it's, most of those shooting galleries, then there's like the shooting gallery, it's in a gallery.
Yeah.
And I don't know, so there's that association of that reference.
Sure. When you were doing the performance, a couple of significant things I thought happened. One thing was when you were first starting, you sort of jokingly mentioned that it was starting to look like a painting.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I was like, are you kind of like thinking, because your work tends to, it's not necessarily bound by a canvas in a traditional sense or anything like that, but it still has to somehow resemble a painting maybe?
Yeah, I think I see myself as a painter.
Okay.
And I taught at UCLA and 5 years as an adjunct. And I taught sculpture and new forms, which is video and who knows what, performance and that kind of thing. And I always wanted to teach painting, but the painters didn't want anything to do with it. And I can see why. That nobody, absolutely nobody wants painting to change.
Okay, yeah.
In fact, right now it's going backwards. The paintings that people are interested in now look like they could have been done in the 1950s or something.
Yeah.
They have no content. And I think non-objective abstract work or whatever, we're so used to it. It's in our DNA, it hangs in hotels and motels and, painting with no content is just, in my mind, fabric. Fabric design. But I've tried to, I've spent a lifetime trying to extend painting and make it more of an activity and interesting and an experience for people. And I don't think I've succeeded on a big level, but in my mind, I'm happy with what I've done.
You mentioned you were teaching. When were you teaching at UCLA?
90s.
In the 90s.
1990, I think 92, around in there, sometime 5 years. And at the same time as Helter Skelter, I was teaching at UCLA, and a lot of the faculty then was in part of Helter Skelter.
Okay. And the painting students just didn't want to have anything to do with your courses, or?
Well, I have a different theory about how people learn.
Okay.
Because I dropped out of school, and I don't have a degree in anything. And I had a lot of success. I have students that are way more successful than me. And I mean, I don't know about that, but they're better known and they're more successful financially, and and the amount of attention they get, which is all deserved. I had some great students. And I had a different, because I worked with people who everybody had a master's degree.
Yeah.
Even my students got master's degrees in the end, a lot of them. And I was told, that you couldn't take more than 12 students, so you could hit. So what I thought was, these people are teaching art the way they learned it. And it's been going on forever.
Okay.
And ever and ever. But my theory was, you take a class and you have 50 students because they learn more from each other than they can one person. And so you set up an atmosphere that they can thrive in. Then the first thing you have to do is they have to trust you, that you're, and then they'll do anything. They'll do some really great stuff, And I was at a university where it was hard to get into. The students are really smart, smarter than me. And I had a lot of success teaching.
Amazing.
But
But didn't you at one point at least like study engineering, or?
I did.
You did?
Yeah, I studied engineering, and because it was the 1950s when I studied engineering. there were no computers that did drawings,
Oh,
architectural drawings or any kind of drawing. And they made you take an art class. So I took an art class and then I got interested in art.
oh,
And then, I don't know, Wayne Thiebaud taught at a school that I went to.
okay.
And I never took a class from him, but I met him and he used to help me with my homework sometimes.
Okay.
And I thought, hey, these artists are really smart, you know, like it never occurred to me, you know. But so then I got interested in art, and then I guess a critical thing for me was there was a woman whose husband owned a country western station.
Okay.
And somehow she thought I was interesting enough that I should go to New York and look at real art, because I was in Sacramento. You know, they had a small museum, hardly anything ever came there. And so I went to New York in 1960. And I saw, you know, I went to the Guggenheim and I saw Jasper Johns' numbers, you know, 0 to 9, and all in a row. And a painting with 2 balls, which was a real inspiration, you know, to me. And I saw a lot of the abstract expressionists, and it affected me. And then I went back to Sacramento and I realized that the art teachers that I was studying with really weren't artists.
Mm.
So
What were they by contrast? Like, how would you?
well, they were teachers,
Yeah.
you know, and in my opinion, you know, like there's always a myth that so-and-so's not a good artist, but they're a good teacher.
Mhm.
That's impossible.
Right.
What can you learn from a bad artist? Nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing. Like if you wanted to be a carpenter, you go to somebody that wasn't a good carpenter.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
learn bad habits, cut off your thumb. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But so that was a big thing for me.
It's interesting that this is 1960. You're saying?
Yeah,
Couldn't you go to like LA or?
there wasn't anything
There
there.
was nothing there.
No,
San Francisco.
you could go to San Francisco. There was something
Yeah.
there. I forget. I think I forgot the name of the guy. There was one gallery that was pretty good
Okay, in San Francisco.
in San Francisco.
One gallery.
One gallery, you know, that showed real contemporary art and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And then I used to go to San Francisco almost every week for, you know, concerts, rock
Sure.
and roll, you know, was
Yeah.
heavy there. And
So this is interesting though. So it's 1960. You go to New York. You're wowed by Jasper Johns and the Abex artists. You come back to Sacramento and you realize like what your teachers are presenting you is not really worthwhile. What do you do now? Like, do you try to create like your own network? Your own.
I joined the Coast Guard.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, you know, I didn't want to be drafted. You know, I didn't want to be drafted. And, you know, I guess the difference is, you know, and it's hard to relate to it now, but when I was 13, 14 years old,
Mhm.
I'm thinking, hey, I've got 4 or 5 years and I could be drafted,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know, and so younger people were making plans that they don't have to make now.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem. You know what I mean? Because what it does is kind of boosts you into, you know, growing up. And so there's generations of people who have never had to do anything they didn't want to do,
Mhm.
which is kind of, for me, kind of foreign.
Mhm.
You know, because I've always been in situations where somebody's told me to do something I would never have done unless they told me, but I couldn't get out of it. You know,
Okay.
like I couldn't say no, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of an experience that I think everybody should have.
Of sort of being forced into situations maybe you don't want.
Well, I think it's a life lesson, you know, like it's a life lesson like baseball.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like now, there's generations now who want to know absolutely everything. So if there's an umpire who makes a decision that may or may not be right,
Mhm.
they stop the whole game to look and on video
Yeah.
to make sure. And the thing is that it's better to live your life knowing that no matter what authorities say, right or wrong, they're always right.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
You argue with a policeman, you might get a flashlight over your head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's a life lesson, and it's better to know that in a work situation. But it doesn't pertain to art, I guess.
Yeah.
You can kind of do whatever you want. I mean, that's the point of being an artist.
Yeah.
You get to make up the structure.
At the same time, I mean, as this show demonstrates downstairs, like there is, I guess it was, you mentioned the drawings originally kind of interested you in engineering. Downstairs you have drawings, which are not just mock-ups, but I guess also artworks in their own right of more environing, like rooms and installations. For
a lot of perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So I personally, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like, wow, so there's a lot of planning that goes into these seemingly chaotic spaces and gestures. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you make plans because people don't buy my work, really.
Okay.
The gallery supports me pretty much. They're patient with me. And other artists, they carry water for me and I carry water for them, like they make money and I make things interesting. Maybe,
Sure.
maybe that's a fair trade.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to insult the painters, but I do all the time. And I guess the thing is that I do a lot of preparation because they're going to be in a public place. So I kind of ready, but then things go wrong.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot of forethought and preparation, things go wrong, and that's why I don't have an audience usually. Like last night I had an audience. That's really unusual.
Yeah.
Because I think that if you have an audience, it sort of demystifies the whole process. Like if they come in and it's all done, then they have to imagine how it happened.
Yeah.
And they always imagine it way more outrageous than it really was.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people have watched me make those wall paintings, they think it's going to be a big deal, and it's not.
It's kind of repetitive.
Yeah, but if you kind of come into it and it's all finished, you think, oh my God, how'd this happen? And then they have to sort of decode the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the way I see it, it's like the circus comes to town. Some people see it, and then the work is always torn down. I have 35 years of throwing everything I made away. So it doesn't exist anymore. It only exists in people's minds. And then they tell people about it. And as the years go by, things that they've seen previously get bigger and bigger and bigger because people, their imaginations, they magnify and exaggerate and do all that stuff.
So I just want to jump on that. So let's call this observer dependency or something like that, right? Is this when you're planning on a work, when you're enacting a work, are you kind of thinking ahead to maybe how it could be open-endedly interpreted by like a viewer?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a division of responsibilities. I make the work, people interpret the work, people look at the work, people write about the work, and I don't have to agree with them, but that's their job. And not only that, I can learn something from that process, what they bring to it. And oftentimes, different people bring different information in. It's like my teaching theory, like you have all these people, a diversity of people, and they can sort of inspire and affect each other and what happens. And so there's the same thing with the paintings, like they look at them and different people get different, have a different experience. And
I want to, you mentioned things going wrong. Which I find interesting, if only because, again, maybe because you were originally interested in engineering, but a lot of your work over the years, uses very non-traditional methods for applying paint to a surface. I'd say mediated in general, but it's more like machines. Last night you used a paintball gun, which is something you can buy at a store. Do you ever design your own machines, or?
Yeah, oftentimes.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, like the shooting gallery, I made that thing
Okay,
from scratch.
even the guns, or?
No, the guns are bought.
Yeah.
You know, the items, and
Yeah.
you know, with the guns, I would have preferred to have a gun that looked like more of a sporting gun instead of a military gun. But the kind of people who play paintball are, they're, you know, I suspect they didn't go in the military. So, you know, and you know, I have a gun. I have a lot of guns, but I had a gun that needed to be sighted in about 3 weeks ago, and I went out to the shooting range, which is run by the County of Los Angeles. And on the left side of me, there's a guy from New York, got a New York Yankees t-shirt on, you know, and they're shooting, you know, they're shooting a military gun, you know, an AR. There's an older woman on the right side of us that's probably in her 70s, with a woman in her 30s that's in a halter top, and they're shooting an AR, you know? And we're there with a gun that we're planning to go hunting with, trying to sight it in for the first time. We loaded our own ammunition, and we were out there kind of fooling around. And I told my friend, I said, "Man, this is making me really uncomfortable."
It should. Okay, but even yesterday though, with the paintball gun, there was a moment where it kind of glitched or got stuck. And I'm wondering, when you do use like machines or technology to apply paint, is this like, if something goes wrong or the machine gets stuck,
It's greatest.
it's like a happy accident? Yeah.
You know, like I had a painting that I call, you know, sort of titled after Barnett Newman, Who's Afraid of Red, Blue, and Yellow. And I had 30 gallons of red paint, blue paint, and yellow paint. 30 gallons each. And then I had a motorcycle that powered the whole thing up, and there were pumps that the motorcycle drove the pumps, and this thing, I was on the motorcycle and this thing like shot against the wall. And it shot against me, you know, I turned all red, and like somehow the red hit me. And it was called Who's Afraid of Red, Blue, and Yellow, but the yellow wouldn't go. Something was wrong, you know, and there were people there at that time, and you know, they start getting nervous and they think, you know, something's wrong. But for me, it's kind of exciting because now I have to be creative to solve the problem. So that's all part of the art part, you know, it's a creative part. And so I see that, you know, it's a challenge to do things in a public place, but when I think about my art, I never think it's going to be in a living room.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't. You know, I just think, I don't think it's going to be in a museum necessarily forever. But I think I prefer to show in that venue where it's a lot of work to put my work up, a lot of preparation. I have a lot of money in it, of my own money, not other people's, because I don't do that. And it's just as much trouble to put it up for 10 people as it is 10,000.
Sure.
So I always imagine that, you know, a lot of people are going to see it, and I've been pretty successful on that level. Most of my work has been shown in museums and places like that.
Humor is an important element of your work, and when you talk about kind of the yellow not appearing, it kind of creates, I mean, maybe it's a problem to be solved too, but also it creates kind of a comedic environment too, right? Possibly, or maybe you don't see it like that at the time, but a good deal of your work is funny.
I'm a funny guy, you know. I have a great sense of humor, and I'm sarcastic.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
You know, like the stacked paintings. The original painting was 1,000 pictures, it was titled, and I made 1,000, and I designed it for the gallery that it was shown in to go floor to ceiling. And when I got to the ceiling, I couldn't get any more paintings in, and I had 4 left. So I got a hammer and I pounded them in, you know.
Wow.
And because I think that if you're an artist, you have to be honest. You know, you can't say, hey, I can get by with, you know, 996.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I said it's
Yeah.
going to be 1,000. It's going to be 1,000. So, but that, you know, I guess the content of that work was, it's kind of what painters do. They have one idea and they make 1,000 paintings. Like Mark Rothko,
Okay.
for instance.
Yeah.
You know, on my phone, there's a thing that they post a daily Rothko.
Yes.
Do you get that?
I think there's on Instagram or something.
Yeah, it's on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I only leave it on there because I'm sarcastic.
Yeah.
But I can't tell if my phone's upside down or not.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
somebody who, I can see suicide, you know, if you just make the same thing.
Sure.
I get up in the morning thinking I'm going to have a new experience and learn something.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine going to the studio and making another one, you know, like the other one, and doing that. But that's what makes the art world, that fuels the money. A style or an object that they can identify with.
Sure.
You know, and I think the people who deal and sell art, they don't want to try to convince somebody, you know, of work that's difficult. Until it gets to the point where it's not labeled difficult anymore. Because, you know, with my work, I think it's a lot of work to convince somebody that it's even art or that they should consider spending money on it.
Okay.
And, but like, again, you know, I think there's this sort of division of responsibilities. And I'm happy with the people who, my audience is mostly young people with no money. A lot of artists, people like that. And so I respect that. I respect my audience, and I'm willing to show just for them in a way. You know, and everybody else gets drug along. But I feel like, you know, just because I'm not making money, I should get bitter and, you know.
No, but as you mentioned earlier, it's not like the process would change any. It would still be as difficult to realize, or, you know.
Yeah.
But I do have a question, like following up on 1,000 paintings. But these are all, so to speak, each one was like an individual work that you yourself stretched the canvas.
I did all the work.
And how long did it take you to do 1,000?
Well, I did 1,000 once, the first one.
Yeah.
And then I was asked to do something at the County Museum in Los Angeles, so I made another 2,000. And I recycled the first 1,000.
Okay.
And then I made a big ball of 3,000. And
how long is each batch of 1,000? Like 6 months, a year?
Well, I got better at it.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I was doing construction at the time. I supported myself with construction for more than 30 years. And I funded my own work. And so I made all these stretcher, I cut all the wood, I put them all together, I stretched them all, I primed them all, and then I stacked them in whatever configuration they ended up in. And but then I made one that, then I made 1,000 a couple times, and because they were all stuck together where they were thrown away, a lot of them were recycled. But then I made a piece that was called 50/50, and it was 5,050.
Okay.
And someone bought that, and now it's at the Hamburger Bahnhof. And then there was some, what about a retrospective of my work, and somebody paid me to make it again.
Yeah.
So I made another 5,000. And in the end, you know, I got so I could easily stretch 100 canvases in a couple hours.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
And cutting and putting them together, that about the same,
yeah,
you know. And I was working in construction. I just go home at night and produce 100
okay.
canvases,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And the same with the 1,000 clocks that I made.
yeah. Okay,
Same thing. It took me 5 years to make it. I turned 60, so I thought it was time to make a piece about time.
sure.
You know, and art is really a documentation of how you spend your time.
Okay,
So I made a piece about time that took time to do. And it cost me $100,000 of working in construction.
wow, yeah,
And I handmade everything.
yeah,
I handmade the mechanisms, I handmade the clock faces, I handmade the hands. It took me 5 years and $100,000.
wow,
And then it ended up in Helter Skelter in an exhibition that most of the work was paid for and produced by the museum.
Mhm.
Because it was a different generation who made, and I'm not criticizing it because some great things were made that way,
mhm,
but they, in Los Angeles, that generation made art like a film.
okay.
I have an idea, I need production.
Which generation is this? What decade? What decade are we talking about? Which generation?
Early 90s. So
Okay.
Helter Skelter, I think, was 92 or 3. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, you know, it just was a different thing. And my thing was the critics just said it was no big deal.
Okay.
And, but I think all the writing didn't talk about what I was talking about.
Hmm.
That it's kind of an accomplishment that one person on their own can do, like the Watts Towers or something, you know, like it's kind of a dedicated, you know, idea, and,
Yeah,
and you kind of realize it.
Yeah.
And so it was in the wrong exhibition, but the thing that was great about it, because I was in that exhibition, I have a huge following of young people.
Mhm.
Because we're in Helter Skelter, you know.
Sure.
And it is an important show in Los Angeles history.
Yeah.
Because Los Angeles is the capital of decorative painting.
Yeah.
And that changed it. What it did is it was kind of the first big show that had any kind of content.
Okay.
I mean, people in film in Los Angeles, they don't like content. That's obvious if you go to the movies or watch television.
Mhm.
And the whole town is kind of poisoned by the film industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's a bad product by and large for the amount of money that's spent. But on the other hand, it employs a lot of people. And they're union in a lot of cases. I mean, there's positives too, you know.
That's an industry, yeah.
Yeah, but like I say, I'm kind of critical and sarcastic about the whole thing.
So, but you're based in LA.
Yeah.
And you have been almost your whole life, pretty much.
Yeah, half. Yeah.
So why the commitment? Do you think LA provides, and you were also influenced by Bruce Nauman, right? Like you two.
Well, he was a friend, and we lived in the same house for
Sure.
7 years,
Okay.
or something like that.
Yeah. So is this like an environment, just despite Hollywood and the poison that runs through it, that also has like this sort of atmosphere where only like you guys can make this kind of like new kind of art?
Yeah, Bruce Nauman didn't.
At least in the 60s.
He lived there a long time, I think 13 years.
Yeah.
And he sold one drawing.
Right.
And then I was close friends with Ed Keenholz, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
All his work sold in Europe and in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But Los Angeles, you know, what I like about it is I'm third generation California.
Okay.
My family goes back to the 1800s. And I like it because it's uncivilized.
Okay.
But I also don't like it because it's uncivilized, you know, it's a tricky thing, you know. I think, you know, Los Angeles, when I went there was a lot of space, cheap. I had a studio that was 2,000 square feet. I had it for, I think it was 14 or 15 years for
Early on in your career?
Yeah.
Wow.
For $100 a month.
Wow.
This is in the 1970s and 80s.
Yeah.
And then I had 3 studios in Pasadena, where it's now like everything is like Soho and all that stuff. It's all redone, and you know, now it's a fancy area in town.
Yeah.
But I had 3 different studios. I probably had close to 20,000 square feet.
Wow.
In these 3 studios for $575 a month total. And that was going on. And so people were coming to Los Angeles, you know, for free, you know, cheap rent and everything. And then Helter Skelter, that really
Opened things
that
up?
really did it. Yeah.
That did everything in, you think? Okay.
No, it really, yeah. I mean, it really brought a lot of people out.
Yeah.
Rents started going up, and spaces started disappearing. You know, Los Angeles now is like New York. I don't know what it's like now, but what it was, you know, when I used to go there, I'd go downtown to see art shows and stuff. Everybody on the street's 30 years old. I go back 10 years later, everybody on the street's 30 years old. You know what I mean? And Los Angeles has a history of people going there, cutting a demo record, trying to get into music, and then they all sort of, they last 5-10 years, and then they go back to wherever they came from, you know, Midwest or wherever. And that's going on now.
Yeah.
You know, there's just a flood of people with master's degrees right out of school coming to Los Angeles, working in the creating paintings, delivering paintings, or artwork.
Yeah.
Working,
sort of the behind the scenes.
working in galleries. All the galleries are coming there.
Yeah.
You know, David Zwirner's moving to Los Angeles now. And Hauser Wirth is there. Gagosian has always been there. That's where he started. But so that's what's going on. And I don't know.
I'm curious. You know, you mentioned your studio and everything. What is your studio practice like? Typically, do you work with assistants?
No.
So it's just you alone?
I did. I've never had more than one.
Yeah.
One time I had 2, and I've had a job since I was 9 years old, and so I have a different work ethic, and with an emphasis on production. And I found that if you have one person and you work with them and you give them something to do and you leave them alone, you give them responsibility, you get a lot done because they're proud of being able to do it and working together. And we're really, you know, we have a good friendly relationship. It's really great. But if you hire 2 people, you don't get twice as much work done. You get a lot of talk and, you know, wasted time and, you know, all that stuff. So I've only really had one assistant ever, and now I don't have any. COVID slowed everything down.
Yeah.
So I'm working alone, but I do have a person that I can call in once in a while if I need to move something, or you know, maybe a day's work or something. So I've really kind of pared it all down, like everybody, and a lot of materials you can't get, and, you know, all that stuff. Hard to complain because we've all suffered the same problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So a work like shooting gallery, for example, which is quite recent, but probably maybe even made during the pandemic, because at least it says in the work list it was 2021.
Yeah, but it's been finished for years.
It's been finished for, okay. But if you mostly did that by yourself, like you put it all together.
I did. Yeah, I made the whole thing. And I had somebody help me because parts are heavy and we had to move them around and put it together. It's been put together in my studio for at least 3 years.
Okay.
And then I have other works. I have a dump tank you know, which is a traditional kind of dunk
Like you
tank.
throw the apple. You know,
Yeah, and I designed it for an art fair. You know, I thought that would really be fun, you know, like
sure.
art collectors could, you know, buy balls and throw them at me. I'd be inside, you know, like you could dunk the artist, you know, the kind of a thing. I'd dress up like a clown, you know, only I'd have a beret on, you know, and then the galleries aren't going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, they're just not going to do it. You know, that's a fantasy that I had. So now the gallery wants to do some kind of performance with it.
Mhm.
And so what I'm doing is on the seat inside the dunk tank, it's all done. I'm going to make 3 different figures of the thinker.
Okay.
You know, Rodin's thinker.
Yeah.
The thinker will be, you can dunk the thinker. And you can dunk the thinker in paint instead of water. And then I kind of tend the whole thing. People will dunk the thinker. I'll go in, take it, put it in a chair, it'll sit there. And then, you know, we'll go through three thinkers.
It sounds
And
awesome.
then,
Yeah.
and then the person who dunks the thinker with the fewest number of balls
Mhm.
will win a trophy that's about this big,
Mhm.
and it's the thinker's brain.
Okay.
So there's like a brain
Yeah.
that's, I'll go leaf it, and they'll have a trophy. So they, you know, they can go in with the thinker's brain. And basically it's kind of a sarcastic, you know,
Sure.
I don't know, it'll be funny. It'll be,
Yeah.
you know, some great things will be made from it. And we'll see how it goes. But I've transformed, you know, the piece into something that I can get rid of it.
Yeah.
And
And when are you going to exhibit this or unveil it or to view it or?
I think, you know, the gallery tried to talk me into doing it now.
Okay. For this show?
No, in Los Angeles,
Los Angeles.
simultaneously
Okay.
with this show. But I need to fabricate the thinkers.
Yeah.
Which they try to get me to do something else, you know, like other people, you know, I think the thing is the thinker thing, or the dunk tank thing has been so long, you know, it's been ready and done for so long and sort of like no interest at all.
Mhm.
And I thought, man, if I dress up like a clown and I'm 83 years old, I could break my hip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We waited too long, you know? And so I kind of got it to this thing, and now I need to, I had a commission in Vancouver that I don't know how I got it, but it's a Canada goose sitting on top of an elevator shaft that's really up high, and then the goose, you know, shits paint down the side of the shaft, you know, and that was all good, you know, and the people who were behind the whole thing, they gave me some kind of a deposit. They paid me, and then they paid the fabricator to do the mold of the piece.
Mhm.
And then they called and said, it's off, you know. And it was because they should have considered an indigenous person for the commission.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know, but they paid all their bills and they didn't get anything.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the price of political correctness, I guess. But the thing is that I'm going to take that money that they gave me and make the thinkers.
Sure.
And, you know, and do something else with it.
Yeah.
And the people that I was working with, they were great. Just one of those things.
Yeah.
It's times we're living in, you know. Like I have 3,000 acres that's been 900 of it's been in my family since the 1800s. I've added another couple thousand.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 3,000 acres that on the south end is a tribe.
Yeah.
The Wintunes. On the north end, there's a tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with indigenous people.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know.
Canada, I think it's a very fraught relationship with its indigenous populations. Not to say states like Washington don't, but it's I think it's an ongoing thing with Canada. So
Yeah, it is here too now more than it used to be, maybe, but still not fixed.
Yeah.
You know, not by any stretch of the imagination. But you know, I don't know. Well, everything's changing. We don't know how it's going to turn out.
But speaking of maybe of like PC culture, lack thereof, I kind of want to talk about the neon works that you're exhibiting, which I think are very funny, very kind of like inappropriate, like in a comedic way, you know, and also semantically, very interesting. I think with the way sort of the graphic nature of text, like the shape of it kind of like changes and turns into like a different word. Big pig, I think is one instance of that. And like duck, fuck, dig, you know, stuff like that. Now, interestingly enough, in works, you do have blueprints for this that are very detailed. So a lot of thinking goes into these like clearly irreverent pieces that are just like kind of like a middle finger to anyone really confuse them. You know?
Whoever stops by.
Whoever stops by. And I mean, how long have you been making these pieces, and what's sort of the motivation perhaps behind them?
Well, I think the thing is that the way it started, I've been deer hunting since I was 10 years old. And I don't drink any alcoholic beverages now, but then I drank beer. And the deal was deer season in California is in August. It's early, and it goes through September almost. And so it's hot.
Yeah.
And so during deer season, I drink beer. That's, you know, because it's hot.
Sure.
And then so, you know, when deer season was over 1 year, I thought, wow, I could make a sign that says deer beer, you know, and just change the D to a B, you know? And so I made it just for the studio.
Okay.
And you know, it just kind of flashed in the studio, and it made me feel good, you know. But then it, you know, when it went from there, I made a piece called Deer Beer, and I made it out of deer decoys, and all the deer had a paintball gun in their ass, you know, that shot, and the whole table revolved and shot the wall, and basically it was all about minimal artwork, paintings. Everything was a black circle, you know, kind of a minimal thing. And then there was a bear that was a black bear, and it spun really fast and made a black circle. And the Hamburger Bahnhof owns that too.
Okay.
And that's where the neon started. And then Big Pig, you know, I have feral pigs on my property. And
so again, it's sort of like what you were saying, like art is kind of like how you spend your time.
Yeah. It's a little bit of that. And then there's a lot of sarcasm, you know, like the one that's about art fairs, you know.
Were you thinking at all about like Bruce Nauman's neon pieces?
Well, we were friends, you know. I had the neons made at the same place he had neons made when he was in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So, yeah, sure. You know, look, my generation, no matter what they say, we're all influenced by Bruce Nauman.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And nobody even close, because he's a great artist.
Well, it's especially, I think, interesting in your case too, because A, you know personally, B, early on, when, you know, by your own admission, there isn't much going on. It's like the 60s, like in 1960 in California, it's like barren. But all of a sudden now you have these like really interesting artists, like you, like yourself included, you know, who are like coming up and like doing something really innovative very quickly. You know? Well,
you know, I think what happened was, this is the way California, after the Second World War, the state of California needed, the whole country might have needed teachers
Mm.
and engineers.
Mhm.
So they set this whole school system up to train teachers,
Mhm.
really.
Mhm.
And it was a state college system. And they had no artists, they had no people, you know? So they hired all these people out of the Midwest who were grinding stones and making etchings, and, you know, it was really retro, you know? And the people they were hiring weren't professional artists. They weren't exhibiting, they weren't anything. They're just teachers, you know? And, but then cheap airfare, 60s hits, schools started bringing people from New York,
Mhm.
you know, Robert Motherwell, and then Wayne Thiebaud started teaching, great teacher, great artist. And then other people, you know, Elaine de Kooning came out with a thing, you know, John Copeland's who started Art Forum. And, you know, they brought people from the East Coast, you know, instead of the Midwest.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of back and forth in the 60s because you could go there cheap on an airplane.
Mhm.
And so there was, so the 60s, you know, kind of, you know, late 60s, early 70s.
It all came from New York.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, come on, you know, there's nothing like New York.
Yeah.
You know, anybody that denies that's crazy. You know, it's still the capital of art.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
and you know, Los Angeles is a lot better, but it's not New York. It just isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, the closer you get to Europe, the better you are. You know, in America.
Yeah, I mean, New York is definitely a painting city for sure.
Yeah, with a painting
yeah.
tradition. And you know, the thing about New York, I lived there in '72 for a year.
Mm.
The thing about New York is when you see something and you don't know where it came from, like a painting,
Mhm.
people in New York know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they honor their people or their whatever you want to call it.
Especially if they were like New York based artists
Yeah.
during their lifetime.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's great.
Yeah.
That's really great. So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's also, you mentioned, again, I keep returning to this because I find it so fascinating to think that there was like nothing and then all of a sudden there's something. Like the 60s, like happened very quickly, you know? And like a lot of those works that happened are still cited and studied today, you know? So it's definitely a very interesting time. But to think, you know, you mentioned Rothko, you know, who's part of the Abex, you know, tradition, and perhaps like other artists within like maybe Pollock or something is more interesting. But so do you have like early like impressions, formative, like you did mention Jasper Johns, but any particular works where you're like, you know what, this is like doing something and it's like stayed with you and you maybe always.
Yeah, I think, you know, Jackson Pollock for
Jackson
sure.
Pollock, okay.
And
the drip paintings? Or
for sure. Well, there's a 16mm film, I think, made of him painting outside.
Right, yeah.
And I saw that when I was a teenager, I think.
Yeah.
And I just remember, I thought I remembered, you know, because I was talking to somebody and I said, you know, I saw that film when I was 18 years old, and he goes outside and he puts an old pair of shoes on that have paint all over him and he dumps a doorknob out, puts a shoe on, you know, and I thought maybe that doorknob was my, you know, I imagined that. But then I saw the film again and sure enough he did. You know what I mean? And so, but when I saw that got me really interested. And then I got into all the stuff, you know, like I got into Jung, you know, what Pollock was way into that. And then I got into that whole thing, and then I realized, you know, there's a connection between what's going on here and what's going on there, you know, and that these artists were truly smart people, you know, and that was all New York.
Two things, I mean, sorry not to cut you off, but so Pollock is still like a very canvas-based artist, and you definitely go past that. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have like the borders of a canvas, though.
No.
You could argue that, I think it was like Clement Greenberg or someone who called it like all over painting.
Yeah.
And maybe in a sense you could call your work all over painting, or some pieces. And then also the kind of spiritual reverence maybe that's in Pollock's like Jungian, you know, your work is like very reverent and almost like attacks really the sort of spirituality of Abac's.
I think, but art's changed a lot.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah.
Contemporary art it's not important.
Right. Yeah.
It's a collective effort. And it's not important. You can't treat it like that the same way, you know, like we buy a computer and we don't expect it to last. You know, it's made in an environment where cost is important. And same with art, you know, like it's not old masters art, you know, like if people come and say, well, how are we going to save this thing? You don't save it, you know, treat it like your phone, trade it in, throw it away.
Okay.
You know, and that's the thing, everything's kind of, in my mind, temporal. And it's an activity and it's an experience. And here people are making these paintings that look like they were made in the 1950s. And I guess it's okay, you know, I just see it as the applied arts. You learn how to do it and you do it better than other people. Some people have more skills than others, and other people have discovered some technique that's very beautiful. I mean, you see it on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see people making beautiful brush strokes or some damn thing on Instagram, and you just go, oh my God, you know?
I'm inclined to agree with you about maybe this sort of preoccupation, like with moving backwards in a way in the field of painting. I would speculate a lot, because for so long people, I think since even the 70s, people were like, painting is dead, there's no point in pursuing it. It's like, well, you let it lie fallow that long. I mean, if no one's innovating it, then where do you expect it to go? Like I mean, with Instagram now, I mean, we could be exposed to so many like canonical paintings that are great to like really interesting contemporary works now, tons more than anyone could, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to process it all.
Yeah,
really.
And there's no background because everyone said it was dead the whole time.
Well, it's never dead.
Exactly.
You know, Jasper Johns is more valuable than a wheelbarrow full of gold. You know what I mean? So, but in my mind, you know, history sort of stops with contemporary art, you know, and there are some great contemporary artists, Jasper Johns for one, so on and so forth. But the thing is that I don't know. It's not modern to treat art in the same way as it was dealt with 100 years or 50 years ago, or even 30 years ago. And what I'm waiting for, and I'm really optimistic, is somewhere there's a genius off stage in the wings, going to come out and burn the house down. You know, like Warhol did.
Sure.
You know, just said, hey, whoa, here's a whole bunch of people that have a different sense of morality and what they think art is, and it's made in a different way, and it's irreverent. You know, it's made with silk screens and all that stuff, you know, and it it was exciting. They were making films and they were making all kinds of stuff. And that could happen again in my mind. And I'm waiting, you know, maybe I'll see it, maybe I won't. But the thing about art is it's the change business, ultimately. And it's not interesting if it doesn't change, and it's sure as hell not interesting if it goes backwards. Then it becomes the applied arts.
So is this the kind of thinking that like leads you to like find these very non-traditional ways to paint? Because I mean, it's not necessarily like I don't believe it's like a different morality to I don't know, for example, use a paint gun to paint, or drive a motorcycle into a wall. You know, I mean, maybe it is. It seems like destructive in a way, but sorry.
I think, you know, I'm trying to give people a different experience that involves paint. And it's in my mind, it's evidence, and it's performative. And it's
but it's also working with the machine too. Like the way a digital artist might work with a computer,
Mhm.
you're still working with like a kind of technology, like
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, I guess strictly speaking, even a paintbrush is a type of technology, so that has more of like a traditionalist connotation to it than.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's in my background.
Yeah.
You know, when I taught at UCLA, those students were the top 10% of the people in whoever applied.
Mhm.
So they were extremely smart. And then I would get them in an art class, and their backgrounds were different. Their father didn't have a place where you could work with tools and all that in the garage.
Okay.
So they had no exposure to any of that. Their parents probably weren't working class carpenters and people who waited on tables and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But they probably had a big library.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So the kids were really smart,
Yeah.
but they couldn't make anything.
Mhm.
So you had to understand that those people could make great things and they could look terrible.
Okay.
You know, but then you had to bring out the content, you know, like, what did you intend that thing to be?
Mhm.
And the kids were so damn smart that it was amazing,
Okay.
you know. And then, you know, I think that kind of brought on fabrication, you know, by other companies and people, because they had great ideas, they just don't know how to make it,
Yeah.
you know. So it was a great experience because I never finished school, you know, to be able to teach at a major university.
Yeah.
That's great. I learned a lot from those kids, you know, who are still my friends. Jason Rhodes, I was very close to.
Okay. Yeah.
And I went to high school with his mother and grew up in the same area.
I just wanted to ask one final question.
Sure.
Perhaps. So you're currently working to develop an opera alongside these other projects that you're developing. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Well, I know a story that maybe only I know.
Okay.
And it involves people who are all passed away now.
Mhm.
And so I know the story, and I'm trying to develop it into an opera with people who can help me with that. And the exciting part is that they're half my age, and one person can write the music, another the libretto.
Mhm.
I know the story, I can make the sets.
Mhm.
And we have some contact with a real mezzo soprano who's performed at the Met, lives in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to produce this thing, you know, it's a classic, it's 2 men and 1 woman, it's like Shakespeare and like the opera. So, and you know, researching into the opera, I think there's been like 8,000 operas produced.
Sounds.
You know, only Verdi's performed
Yeah.
for all the good reasons. But anyway, I worked with a Belgian theater group. I did the sets for them.
Mhm.
And I really like working, you know, in that area because the art world's getting so conservative. I don't feel that attached to it anymore.
Okay.
And so I'm looking for a group that, you know, theater and opera, it's all different. There's content.
Do you have like a prospective date, like or
No, I'm trying to get it together, and there's no interest, you know, but I'll get it together.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I've got a lot of big projects together on my own, and I know how to do it.
Cool. Yeah. You could maybe mount it at your studio as like a theater thing. I don't know, maybe.
You know what, though? Here's the thing about it.
Yeah.
If you make the thing and you don't ask for money, it'll get done.
Mhm.
I've got 2 cars I want to crash.
Mhm.
I've got them all prepared. I've been in 2 head-on accidents.
Mhm.
First one, the guy that hit me was killed right on the spot.
Yeah.
The second one, I was damn near killed. They had to do an open heart surgery. So I bought the car that hit me, and the car I was driving, I'm going to fill them full of paint and crash it. And it's all done and ready to go, and I just need a place, and it'll come up somewhere,
Okay.
hopefully.
I kind of, one final question, one thing I wanted to mention, because I do think like humor often relates to like sadness in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that you're taking this very tragic experience and not trivializing it and not celebrating it either, but transforming it into something that's almost quasi-comical. And I don't think it would have, just the idea of describing it, I don't think it would have the effect if not for the actual
event.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, really, no
Yeah.
kidding. And then, and as I get older, then I kind of look back. I've had a lot of experiences. Like now I'm also making a gold mine because I had a gold mine.
Okay. Yeah.
And the thing is that the gold mine is kind of a statement about my life for me. And that is, we got a lot of gold. It wasn't worth anything at the time, $32 an ounce.
Mm-hmm.
But the process is important,
Hmm.
not the results, but the process, so I'm making a gold mine. It's basically it's a room,
Hmm.
and the light will come out through the cracks in the walls and stuff. And the room's all gold, and there's everything in it's been gold leafed. And so all this gold light will come out of this basically box.
Progress process.
Yeah, that's it. You know what I mean? What can I say? It's like,
Awesome.
bad,
Okay.
bad habit.
Much to look forward to. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Richard and Jeffrey, for that conversation.
Thank you.
And for calling in from Zurich, where you both are, where the exhibition is on until December 23rd. So we encourage audiences watching this to go, if you're near Zurich or in Zurich, to see the show. At the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with a poetry reading. And so today, my colleague Eleanor Krishmar will read a poem from the Rail's latest issue by Coleman Stevenson. Before Eleanor reads, I'll tell you a little bit about Coleman Stevenson. Coleman Stevenson is the author of 3 poetry collections, several books about the tarot, including the Dark Exact Tarot Guide, and a book of essays on creativity accompanying the card game Metaphysic. Her writing has appeared in a variety of literary journals and the anthologies. In addition to her work as a designer of tarot and oracle decks through her company, The Dark Exact, her fine artwork, exhibited in galleries around the US, focuses on the intersections between image and text. You can learn more about Coleman at colemanstevenson.com. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eleanor.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Really excited to read this poem. This poem is called How to Sleep Without Worry. You are bewildered. Do you think you heard the growling of angels? You think you know them. Plumed eyes, shapes like arrows, like ampules of ink. You feel them in the room grown holy. Think you can compel them to grant your one big wish. But you will have other wishes waiting. Take your angels and go on up. I'll live here among the weeds with what I've already got. Find it's the same as having the splendor of heaven. I'll perform simple acts with the mythic importance, the washing of hands, the flicking of a light switch. Every speck of dirt is the same as an angel. We can see the beginning of time through a telescope. Does that make it easier to sleep without worry? I don't sleep, I crack. Ideas like nuts do 3 things at once, inside the folds. Culpeper writes of how a scorpion grew in the brain of a man who smelled basil. I'm done with cowards. I'm growing everything, hatching everything from the eggs of my thoughts. Things that sting, things that glide and creep and swim. I will open my mouth and they will crawl out, wriggle out. The dawn enters me, opens the top of my shell so light can get in, so that I might praise the intricate enveloping nature of all things. The well-packed geometry of a seed, it contains all, disperses all. We think, therefore we are, blood in the head, theory of mind. Find what you can live without and do it now, as an exercise. Find a power greater than pain, then marry yourself to the earth.
Thank you so much, Eleanor, for reading. And thank you to Coleman Stevenson for those words, which are now published in the September issue of The Rail. We encourage you to check out the issue online on our website or in person on a print issue. And thank you so much to Richard and Jeffrey for this conversation. We'd also like to thank Hauser and Wirth's team in Zurich for making today's conversation possible and sending us amazing imagery of the installation. We'd also like to, of course, thank the Terra Foundation, who sponsor our NSE program and make daily conversations like this possible, and for their support of our growing archive. Over the past 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has brought together art, music, dance, film, theater, literature, and thoughtful social and political meditations in our monthly publication and in our public events, like here on our daily NSE. We hope to see you again in the new social environment, and thank you again for joining us today.